men are doing this to women and women are doing this to men. And it's kind of like this elegant dance that people are doing. So seduction involves vulnerability to another person. And to me, it's a kind of mental disease that I see a lot in the world today where people are totally invulnerable. They don't want to open themselves they don't want to open themselves to any kind of hurt. And so
what does that look like?
To me, it looks like somebody that can't fall in love. So the ability to let go and to let somebody else into your psychology, into your psyche, and to let them kind of become a part of you to the point where you could become pain, where they can hurt you, they could abandon you, but you learn from it and you grow from it and you develop from it. And the ability to be vulnerable is what makes a great artist in any kind of realm. It makes a person creative. And I think there's a lot of people now who are desperately afraid to let go, desperately afraid to be vulnerable. And I think seduction, it's a book that has all those evil connotations that you're referring to. But people are so fascinated with it because I think they recognize that it's actually something that they want. They want that kind of power.
Who has more power, the seducer or the seducee?
Well, they both have power. So in the classic example that I use in The Art of Seduction comes from Dangerous Liaisons, one of my favorite books.
Liaisons dangereuses.
Les liaisons dangereuses, très bien, oui. Tu parles français?
I do not speak French.
Oh, okay. But you got the your
a lot of
pronunciation
Sartre, a
is
lot
very
of Camus,
good.
and some French movies.
Well, your pronunciation was very good.
Thank you.
An
actor.
So the main character is Valmont, who's this evil seducer of women. He ruins all of their reputations, right?
Daniel Day-Lewis in the American version.
Yes, that's right. And Michelle Pfeiffer.
Michelle Pfeiffer, that's right.
And so he decides he's going to seduce La Présidente de Tourvel, which I think is the Michelle Pfeiffer character, because she's a prude. She's the most prudish woman of all. To seduce her would be the greatest feather in his cap, right? Because she's impossible to seduce. And then what ends up happening, he tries, she's completely not into him at all because she knows his horrible reputation. And as he tries further and harder and harder, he suddenly finds that he's falling in love with her. He's never fallen in love with any woman before, perhaps because she won't yield to him, whatever the reason is, he's falling in love. And as he falls in love with her, she begins to open up to him. And then the seduction happens. And to me, the lesson is, if you're completely a cold seducer, it doesn't really work. There's no pleasure involved. And if it's a man being like that to a woman, the woman kind of sees through it and is put off. But if you're the kind of seducer that is falling in love with the seduced, if the seduced is seducing you, you will be a better seducer, right?
In that way,
are you going to rescue me now?
You did a great job.
That was very, very lovely.
You didn't need me at all.
Oh, all right.
But it sounds... It removes the level of manipulation if two people are exchanging an experience, both of them opening up and being vulnerable. It removes that element of being done to or something wrong happening.
Let me not make myself out to be the angel that I might appear to be. There is manipulation involved in that book, for sure. I don't deny it. I own it. But that's certainly not all there is to it, And I'm fascinated by the psychology involved in there and what ties it all together. So what ties a great courtesan seducing some French businessman in the 19th century and draining his bank accounts? What ties that to John F. Kennedy seducing the American public? What ties that to Pamela Harriman seducing all these different men as this incredible charmer? What ties that to Josephine Baker and Marlene Dietrich, et cetera, et cetera? What is the psychology involved? Fascinated me. And I couldn't find a book written on that subject. So I wanted to tie them all together and show that there's some very elemental form of psychology involved, which is essentially creating the lure of pleasure, right? Because we're all kind of repressed. We don't have enough pleasure in our lives, right? Particularly nowadays. And to give somebody the sense that through you, they can have some kind of adventure, they can have some sort of weird, pleasurable experience is incredibly powerful. And it ties John F. Kennedy's seduction of the American public in 1960. I'm going to return you to it's called the New Frontier. We're going back to the 19th century. We're going back to America the way it is. The frontier will be outer space. We're going to create this, that, and the other thing. It's incredibly seductive, incredibly pleasurable, because it's built on all of the myths that America is built on.
I mean, you could argue that the movement of Obama enthusiasm,
Sure.
I mean, that was also, it was
a total seduction.
I think we should establish that when we're talking about seduction, we're not only talking about sexual seduction.
Yeah.
That we're talking about, I like this notion of the infiltration of ideas, the notion that you have to be vulnerable enough to have, be able to consider something else.
Well, I just very quickly, one of my favorite philosophers is Friedrich Nietzsche. And in one of his earliest books, he talks about empathy. And he says, when he reads a book, he tries to understand and get inside the spirit of the person who wrote it. Not trying to judge it at all, but trying to genuinely feel the voice behind it and who wrote it and why. So he drops all of his critical skills and he just kind of lets himself immerse in the book. He lets it seduce him. He uses the word seduction all the time. And I feel like people often come to a book or an idea with their own preconceptions, their clothes. That's what I talk about invulnerable. This is what the world is like. These are the labels I prescribe to it. And they don't understand what someone else is trying to say, right? So you can disagree with it, and I try to read books that way. Like I have people whose books I absolutely loathe and I disagree 100% with, and I will name a name, Steven Pinker. I never like his books. I'm the opposite of him, whatever that would be in science fiction terms. But I try and read his books and I try and say, well, maybe there's some wisdom there. Maybe I'm missing it. And I let him seduce me initially.
That's a very old school perspective, though. Like, meaning I agree. I was raised to read things that I don't agree with and find the reasons why. And I went to graduate school and for like 7 years, that's what you do.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is very unpopular is people really are resistant to being seduced.
That's what I'm talking about, the invulnerability.
Yeah.
So let an idea
like they want to read things that they agree with.
Yeah.
And follow the people that they agree with, right?
Yeah.
Do we think it's an increase in camps and division, or do we think it's also a part of people don't know how to come back to themselves? So they're so concerned about having their mind changed or having their identity changed because they think that their identity is associated with, I believe, this set of narratives that only exist over here on the left or over here on the right.
I have my answer, but I'm curious what Robert says.
Well, I mean, it's $1 million question I could go hours for, but there's, I believe there's a great book that I often refer to called The Fall of Public Man by, I'm sorry, I'm just blanking out. Richard Sennett.
Richard Sennett, that's right.
And he traces the narcissism in our culture back to the 19th century. And it's a book that heavily influenced me when we talk about theater and seduction, because he talks about cafe culture in the 18th century and then how in the 19th century it all became about your identity and your politics and who you belonged to and the group that you were with. People became very defensive, very close-minded, and his model is kind of the urban environment like a New York City where you're mingling with people from all different ethnicities, all different races. You're getting in all these different ideas, all these different perspectives are flooding through you, and it kind of makes you a rich urban person, an intelligent person. So a lot of it is that, but I think a lot of young people have grown up in a very, very chaotic environment. A lot of it from technology, however, and then there was 9/11, there was the crash of '08, there was the pandemic, etc. And when you're dealing with chaos and crises, the tendency is to become very defensive and very insecure. And you don't want that openness to other people's ideas. You want to get into your camp where everyone thinks is certain and secure and you know all the answers. And to me, knowledge and wisdom is something, I go back to Socrates, is admitting that you're ignorant, that you don't know. You don't know anything. That's the beginning of knowledge. And that's so alien to our culture, to how people are today.
I mean, I think we're seeing it play out politically also, not just here, but, some might say in France. You're seeing a really strong desire for someone to fix it. for someone to tell you absolutely what's wrong and how to fix it. And what this leads to is, this kind of extreme tribalism, and it leads to scapegoating. Yeah. So, kind of adjacent to this sort of cafe society, which I admit I don't know as much about as I would like to, a lot of kind of going back to the sort of seduction playground. Well, many people are using, online dating sites, for example, as a way to meet people, or people are meeting, in ways that don't involve, let's say, the old-fashioned ways we used to do it. And I always lament, like, once I left grad school, I kind of didn't know how to socialize, because that was where I socialized. And well, like, like you'd go to talks, or you'd go to lectures, or you had students that you knew.
I see.
Like, once I kind of left that, it's like bars, like, what is this? Clubs? Like, that's not for me. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit. It sort of combines a question about seduction, right? And I'm really taken with this notion, and it kind of is throughout, but definitely in a few laws in particular, about this persona that we create, right? The masks that we wear, which, as you sort of pointed out, for those of us who grew up in any state of sort of hypervigilance, you see that everyone's wearing a mask, even the people who are supposed to, protect you and care for you. How do you see that sort of playing out in this sort of field of trying to find connection and love, when we literally have a system that is designed for people to create a persona that in many cases is really not even close to them?
Yeah. Well, the online world, because I'm so old that I have no experience with it at all. For me, back in the day, it was bars, it was clubs, it was meeting people through friends, and having to literally put your whole self-esteem on the line by asking a girl on a date or something like that, right? So I don't really have much understanding, but I think it's very destructive, because we're humans. We have mirror neurons. We have things where we relate to people on a physiological level that cannot be replicated through any kind of technological or algorithm, right? And so people are losing social skills. They're losing the ability to enter into the spirit of another person. They're losing the empathic muscle that happens when you're constantly socializing. So when I read like a Jane Austen novel from like 1820, it's astounding how she is so insanely observant about people, because that's all they had. They were continually socializing. They had no internet. They had no television. It was just parties, salons, people playing the piano, etc. Social. You developed this muscle where you understood people. That's all atrophying with this new generation, right?
Yeah.
So seduction is the ability to enter into the spirit of the other person and understand them on a deeper level and get into what makes them tick. So it can be, on my scale, a very healthy thing. Yes, that can be used for manipulation. So a lot of sociopaths actually are good at figuring out what you like and then using it to manipulate. So I don't deny that. But if you are not a sociopath, you're using this to actually understand what other people are like and what is making them tick. And so I forget what your original question, because I wanted to get back to it.
Yeah, I was talking about just online dating and the wearing of masks.
Oh,
as
wearing
sort
of
of
masks.
Like that is literally the tool of seduction, is to sort of create this persona. Like, here's me holding a beer on a boat.
But then
here's me with my cat.
Right. But then you're going to meet the person, and they're not at all like the persona they created online.
Well, I think, I live in Los Angeles. You do too. I meet plenty of people who are just about the mask that they create. Meaning there's not a lot there, right? Because there's been so much emphasis placed on what I look like and what my body looks like, and, where I'm eating and what designer yoga bra I'm wearing.
Well, to me, that's not what seduction's about.
Right.
Seduction is a psychological game. It's not about the lipstick you wear and the low-cut dress and the beefed-up body that you have. It's completely antithetical. And what I like to use in the book were examples of men and women who are not very attractive, but who are masters of the game of seduction, of playing on people's psychology.
This is the title of the episode. Can unattractive people be good seducers?
Well, one of the greatest seducers, male seducers of all time, was an Italian poet named Gabriele D'Annunzio. You can look him up. He was hideously ugly. He was short. Unfortunately, Mussolini was very much inspired by him. But he was not attractive, and women would say that. But he had a gift of language. He was, he could entrance any woman off her feet by how he talked. And I say in seduction, based on all the research, that is generally a weakness that a lot of women have.
I was going to say,
who's a really good talker.
Right. Women and men are seduced by different things,
women,
right?
It's words, and men, it's visuals. It's unfortunately, it's the obvious physical appearances of things. That's not to say that they can't be seduced by other qualities.
Sure. Well, and attractiveness is different than seduction, because usually for attractiveness, historically speaking, like I, need to put all the caveats, like every caveat that's politically correct, please place in here. But typically women list, money, property, and prestige as things that are important because it indicates, evolutionarily, it indicates an ability to be supported, and attractiveness indicates an ability to make children who will also make children. Like I'm a scientist. I can't help it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Scott Galloway talks about.
No, I think Jonathan sent me something that I think is really very misogynistic. Jonathan sent me talking is foreplay for women. And what I think is lying is how men get women to bed.
Talking doesn't necessarily mean lying.
Yeah.
Really? If your lips are moving. There's that song. Your lips are moving. Your lips are moving. No, but that's one of the earliest lessons I was ever taught by my parents, was that women will use sex to get love and men will use love to get sex. Men will say anything. They will say anything for the purpose of... I deflated him again. He's going to be a shell of his former self.
I'm shriveling up just hearing all of this.
No, I hate that. And I don't know if my parents were right, but you know what? I'm 48. I could say that like 9.9 times out of 10, at least in those formative years, we're talking about in the years when you're learning to navigate junior high, high school, even your 20s, and I'd say this day and age, well into your 30s, I feel like it's still true. Ladies?
I'm going to throw my hat in and put a vote for that there is authentic connection that is possible, that there are many people who are good, who are trying to form connection, and who can use these skills and these tools, I should say, to increase their ability to make connection because they're doing things that they may not understand or off-putting. And if I frame it from that perspective, I might pass it back to you, Robert, and say, from a good place, I'm trying to make connections and I may not be sure what I'm doing. For example, I may be showing my anxiousness, which I don't realize I'm doing. Give us the bit of an overview. How does one become a great seducer from a good place? Yeah.
Well, to me, the word doesn't have negative connotations. I know it does for a lot of people, but I don't see it that way. So the word doesn't put a chill up my spine. It actually thrills me and excites me because I was not raised, but reading the great literature on seduction, the libertine fiction of the 19th century, etc. So to me, it's extremely exciting. One of the most important qualities is to have a lack of defensiveness and a lack of insecurity.
I'm taking notes.
So the typical rake is a man who loves women, who's addicted to women, has a lot of femininity in his spirit, actually, was probably raised by a mother that was kind of dominant. And so he's extremely into female psychology, But one woman can never satisfy him, right?
Has mommy issues.
See, you like to turn these things around. But maybe
it's a bad thing.
Yes, you are.
You have a binary like good or bad. You like something that's either good or bad. You don't like a gray area.
No, that's true. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. That's called a rake? I didn't know that term.
A rake is...
Because that's one of... I have my list of seducers.
A rake is a man who's obsessed with women who really... And I've said it before, I was a rake in my 20s. Oh. So you can go ahead and hate me.
I mean, that should be the title of your next book. I was a rake in my 20s.
Yeah. Well, they call them a reformed rake. So I'm a reformed rake. But you're kind of obsessed with women. You're very interested in them. A lot of men have no understanding of women. They're not interested in them. They're not interested in their psychology, in their world, how they think differently than a man. But rakes are. They're fascinated by it. They're fascinated by their psychology, by just the clothes they wear, by everything they do, their activity, their energy, etc. But they can never be satisfied by one woman. They have to have more and more and more. They need different ones constantly. But for that 1 month where they're interested in you, or 2 months, they are so keyed into you. They're so completely absorbed in you. They love you so much, to give you so much attention, that is very hard for a woman to resist it. This is the kind of the Lord Byron or the Duke Ellington or the Errol Flynns of this world. But getting back to your question, the lack of insecurity. So a lot of men, for instance, they think that they're interacting with a woman, let's say in a bar. It could be a woman, but I'm just thinking, I'm a man, so it's easy for me to go from that perspective. Thinking,
a heterosexual man.
Yeah.
Just trying to be.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Does she like me? What am I doing that's not connecting her? What am I doing that's right? They're absorbed in their thinking. They're absorbed in themselves. And the other person, the woman or the man, can pick that up, can sense it. And it's kind of off-putting. They can sense that they're thinking about themselves in that moment. If you flip that around and you're not thinking about yourself, but you're absorbed in the other person, not to use them or manipulate them, but you're genuinely interested in them. You don't have that defensiveness, that insecurity. It's massively seductive. Because think of it, how rarely that happens to you in life. How rarely does somebody talk to you and actually appears interested in what you have to say, is actually interested in your spirit, is actually interested in your ideas and where you come from in your childhood.
That's classical courtship. It's just, it doesn't really exist anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Right. It is courtship, but it's a skill. It's an ability that you have to let go of yourself.
Well, not to argue for social conservatism, but when there used to be a lead up to sexual intimacy, there was an extended period of time, sometimes, just sometimes, not always, where there was a process of getting to know the other person and learning about them. But when sex is expected, or when both parties expect it as a first night of getting to know someone, there's really not a need in that sense, meaning it becomes more transactional. And, not to be, Marxist about it, it becomes a commodity. Like it really is. Like sex just becomes a commodity. And this component of intimacy really, is kind of gets sidelined.
Well, seduction depends on tension. It depends on resistance from the other person. So if the other person doesn't resist you, there's no kind of, you don't have to do anything. There's no effort. You're going to sleep with them tomorrow, or they're going to leave you. But the fact that they're resisting you makes you go like, what can I do to change that?
But isn't that a manipulation?
So what's wrong with manipulation? If men didn't manipulate women and women didn't manipulate men, there would be no children in this world.
No, it doesn't feel so
Your
good,
parents
Robert.
wouldn't have had you, Mom.
I don't know why they had me.
I don't know why they had me is the line of the podcast.
There has to be some kind of manipulation involved.
I guess.
So if you don't manipulate, all that happens is I just wear the clothes that I wear. I say whatever I want to say, and the other person falls in love with me. We have sex. We have babies.
No, beyond that, there's an app that tells me how close someone is who'd like to have sex with anyone. And all I have to do is open that. I'm not saying me, but people. All I have to do is open that app, and we've lily padded this whole thing.
We have lack of defensiveness. We have lack of insecurities, confidence.
Yeah.
What other qualities are essential?
The ability to get involved in the other person's spirit, which I've already talked about, is very important. And then seduction is a language basically without words. And so you have to master this language. It's a language of gestures, of you take someone to a certain place. There's no words involved, but by taking to this particular place, which may have romantic connotations or whatever, you're gesturing something to them. When you give a gift, there are seductive gifts and there are non-seductive gifts. A non-seductive gift is just spending a lot of money, $10,000 on a ring. Whereas if you spent $10 and you gave them something that reflected something they had said, something from their childhood, some story that they were relating to you, it reveals that you were listening to them, which is very seductive, right? So I tell people, if you're talking to someone for several hours, which nobody does anymore anyway, but let's say that's involved in your seduction, you're talking to them. If later in the conversation you come back to something they said hours ago and you kind of bring it up again in a different context, it's going to register that you were listening to them and you remembered it and it's under your skin and it's deeply seductive because you're listening to someone. People don't listen anymore. They don't reflect. They don't mirror you anymore. It's something we're all missing. That's why I don't find the word seduction evil at all. We're missing this so much in our pleasureless, completely political world where people aren't open to the spirits of other people. They're just so closed off. So you're listening. So that's a gesture. It's not the words that you say, but the fact that you remembered what they said, right? It's how you smell. It's how you look. I mean, don't get me too literal there, but it's a physical communication as well. It's the theater that you create. So you don't show up every night wearing your shorts and your T-shirt. You wear something that shows that you're actually,
not depressed.
Yeah.
Not depressed.
Yeah.
She's teasing me because I wear the same type of T-shirt all the time.
No,
I have a gray T-shirt.
I was teasing myself.
Oh, you were teasing yourself.
Yeah, but that's because you're here. You're not seducing here. Right. I hope. So
what they say, foreplay is everything from the last orgasm to the next one. Sorry.
So I mean, those are the main things: lack of insecurity, confidence in yourself, entering the other person's spirit, and kind of understanding this nonverbal language. You don't have to say, I love you, but you show that you love the other person. You don't have to say a word, but you show it to them by the things that you do for them.
Well, especially this last part about the language without words and the listening and the mirroring someone. Yeah. That's why I don't think it falls under manipulation. It falls under showing up, being present, and you are going to find a match.
Yeah.
If, again, coming from a good intention, people have a natural instinct to be on guard to say, is this person going to cause me harm?
Yeah, right.
And if the manipulation, as we're calling it, which again, I don't think it is manipulation, but I'm addressing the words you're using, Mayim. If the manipulation is to put you at ease to say, I am not going to harm you because I actually am listening. Yeah. Well, the listening isn't a foil. It's actually the person is showing up and doing the work of what it takes to bond and be in connection with one another. And so what you're saying is, hey, you've forgotten, society, how to connect because of these digital tools, because we are no longer required to do so, because there are alternatives, because for all the reasons we know. Yeah. And you should remember, society, that these are the things that are required, and yes, they can be used for nefarious.
They can be.
Tactics.
Well, yeah, and I think a clarification might be helpful here, which I think you absolutely can make, and I think there's a little bit of an obligation here that we should make. The notion that if someone, let's say, doesn't want to go to bed with you, right, that needs to be respected, right? If
course.
someone does not want to, right? I mean, like, I think that's pretty clear. But what you're talking about, if I'm understanding, is we're talking about threading the needle in terms of the way that human primates interact. And there's a verbal and a nonverbal interplay that is largely missing because of a lot of interesting, features in our culture. And honestly, it's in our lifetime.
Yeah.
One of the skills that I was taught was most attractive to females when my parents were growing up was if a guy was a good dancer. And I think it's interesting because what it communicated was a physical kind of interplay, in some cases a playfulness, in some cases a romance. It was artistic, right? It was an understanding of like music and movement. Right. There's an element of sort of like peacocking, but when I think about, what dances were like when I was in junior high, which was totally, like I think the last phase of when people would actually sway and things like that. But I'm thinking about, sort of the romance of courtship is where I think some of this lies. But I just want to be really careful that we're not talking about seduction being, a tool for convincing someone to do something that they don't want to do, right? Like no means no.
Well, a lot of men...
I'm not into you is I'm not into you.
A lot of men have a really hard time now dealing with rejection, right? And so what I tell them, because they've come to me for advice and I've talked to groups of men for this very purpose, is rejection is a good thing. It's fine. You just move on to the next person. If somebody says no, sometimes people say no, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're completely not into you. You're not going to force them to have sex, but you can still try and charm them in some way. But if it's very clear that they don't want anything to do with you, that you're even frightening them, fine.
Right.
Don't take it personally. Move on to the next person and keep. But I think a lot of men can't handle that kind of rejection. They want everything to be easy. They want every woman to sleep with them.
Well, and my fear is that then you're dealing with and I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm saying what we see a lot is men then adopting a persona that is false, that they are sensitive, caring, or interested, so that they, don't have to deal with rejection because they're getting, in theory, what.
Well,
do I sound like a horrible person? Like I'm so cynical about it?
But women can see through that. They should be able to. No?
Sometimes, yeah. Well,
back in the day, they could see through it.
So, yes, and I think that this is where, when we talk about power, I'm interested in power differentials, and I'm interested in sort of places where women are not conditioned, to be able to, have a lot of agency, which can breed situations where it is hard to distinguish. Like if you're taught to always smile and say you're okay when you're not, that obviously translates into much larger issues of what happens in the dating arena, right?
Right.
You're taught to never, don't make him feel bad. Like if he went through all that trouble, if he bought you that expensive dinner, like that's, I think, still a factor for a lot of women.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's sad.
It is sad.
A lot of women have written to me from The Art of Seduction, some complaining, and I feel bad. Mostly they say, your book really helped me see through this really evil guy who was trying to manipulate me. I saw that he was using some of your tactics. I saw through him.
Wow.
And it helped me. I'm fine with that because a lot of it is just opening up the game and showing you how people operate in this world. And I think there are there are obviously malevolent seducers out there, probably more men than women, but there are women who use it for nefarious purposes as well.
Yeah.
So
we've been taught by men.
Huh?
Nothing.
Quick list, Robert. What are the anti-seducer qualities that quickly make people uninterested?
Well, I call it the moralizer. So seduction is not a realm of morality, right? Okay? It's an arena of playfulness. It's theater, okay? And you're enjoying yourself. It's a realm of pure pleasure. And if you're always judging the other person, oh, you said that? You believe that? Oh, I can't believe it. Or you're wearing those clothes? That's incredible turnoff, right? So the moralizer. Drop all of that. Drop all your judgments and be completely open to the other person. There's no There's none of that involved in here. There's no good or bad. Okay. The second thing is generosity, not being generous. So not paying when it could be men or woman, but being very niggly and cheap with your money, with your gifts, etc., and being ungenerous with your attention and your time. But being generous with your time and your attention, your money, is very, very seductive. Okay. I call this the bumbler. There's somebody who's always thinking about themselves and did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing?
That's self-centered neurosis.
Yeah. That's very anti-seductive. This might not be true anymore when I wrote the book, but I had the character of the vulgarian who's very vulgar and
everyone's vulgar now, Robert.
I know.
How do you pick? How do you choose?
Yeah. Also, people who talk too much. This is something that men will have more than women, the mansplaining kind of thing, where they know so much about everything. They know about cars, stereos, wines. They can tell you exactly what you're doing wrong, etc. Talking too much and thinking that you know everything is very, very anti-seductive. These are a few of the qualities. I know there are like 5 more, but I don't want to bore the hell out of you. But you get the general idea.
Very interesting.
That's very helpful. How did you reform yourself from your 20s as a rake?
Well, it gets tiring and it also gets a little bit pathetic. Warren Beatty maybe be able to get away with it, but when you're like in your 40s and your 50s and you're still like a rake and you still have that mentality, I think it feels kind of pathetic. It feels kind of like, and it's also sad because you're going to be lonely. When you're in your 20s, you're having a lot of fun. You're not worried about loneliness because there's so many different women you're involved with, but eventually you maybe either want a family or you want to settle down and you don't want to have this kind of chaos in your life. And you're facing a life where you're going to be alone a lot. So facing those kind of factors, thinking this is kind of pathetic a little bit and it's tiring. And I had my moment. I whatever the expression is, I made hay when the sun was shining. Part of the expression. It's over, all right? I'm getting older. It's not such a bad thing to get older. And I found a woman that I've been with now for a while, and she basically reformed me. She put the collar around my neck, and she tamed and domesticated me.
Was it an easy transition? I've heard, some people who have lived a certain way and then transitioning to that other way, when you start to become more close with someone, when there's an increase in vulnerability, it becomes challenging, and it could be easy to be, oh, wait a second, that other life was maybe a little bit lonely, but a lot of fun and exciting, and I didn't have all these emotional challenges that I'm having now.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And you're always lured back into being a rake again, unfortunately, because you do have very pleasant memories, et cetera. So it is a challenge. You have to work on yourself and you have to grow and you have to mature a little bit and understand that if you're fooling around, you're not going to have that relationship that you want, that you think is very important, you need it very much so. So the woman I'm with, we have a very deep connection intellectually and emotionally. And, we kind of help each other very deeply in each other's work, et cetera. So we're invested very deeply into it. So, you weigh that factor and you go, that's much more important than those momentary pleasures I had in my 20s. And not all men are going to feel that way, but that's my particular journey.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the involvement in each other's work and helping each other in that way and the intellectual connection, I think, is something to look for in partnership.
I have a question, and I know it's not necessarily fair to make you sort of comment on current, dating practices, because, none of us are really in that current pool, but I do think in the framework of what we're talking about, of seduction and power and, sort of that interplay, many people are having, non-monogamous relationships. They're polyamorous. Right. And, I'm fascinated by this just because I think it's very interesting. And, what I hear, from a lot of women is like, two can play at that game. And if he wants to have lots of partners, like I should too. And I'm a sexual person and so is he. And, all these things. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit to where that kind of comes into this notion of, is that a reaction to men being rakes? Is it, is this something that women experience in the same way? And, at what point is there a neurotic or compulsive feature to the need to have multiple partners? Does that come into any sort of understanding of power or seduction that you can understand?
Well, everybody is different. Some people, I think maybe it is a healthy thing where they just have an incredibly powerful sexual drive, and they want different partners, and they found somebody. So I don't like to judge with broad strokes like that.
And sometimes it's not just the sexual connection. It's like having committed, intimate relationships with more than one person. So.
Yeah. But then there's the sex addiction part of it that becomes compulsive, where you're dealing with issues probably stemming from your childhood, probably stemming from your connection to your mother. I know you probably heard of Neil Strauss, wrote The Game. He wrote this book where he tried to get out of the game, where he called The Truth. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Where he tried to reform his ways as a pickup artist. And he went to these retreats in Arizona, and they taught him all these things about who he was and why he has this compulsive need, etc. And he essentially reformed himself. So I think he did. I can't say for sure. But it came from an unhealthy place.
But you have to have self-awareness also to be able to access this kind of information, right?
Well, I think in his case, he was getting...
I'm saying in general, not...
Yeah. But
sounds like he went through a rigorous process.
He did. He wanted to have children. He wanted to have a family. And he thought this, I don't want to be someone's, constantly sleeping around and trying to also have a family. I don't know. I'm not going to go into how he thought. But as far as women, I do believe that men and women are different. I'm sorry to say that.
It's a very radical notion.
I know it is. And I think women think differently about sex than men do.
Generally speaking,
they have more at stake, obviously.
Yeah. Well, one egg a month,
Yeah. So the women that are involved in polyamorous relationships, I don't think it's the same as it is for a man. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't women that are naturally drawn to that kind of lifestyle, and I'm sure there are. But I don't think it's the same drive and the same, I don't think it's as prevalent as it is for men. Excuse me for saying that. I know I'm being a quote-unquote radical gender essentialist here. But I do believe that it is different between men and women, biologically speaking. So.
Let's talk about mastery.
Yes. Mastery of seduction and power.
Well, they do interrelate. They do interrelate because you talk about people finding their life's purpose or finding their life's task. And in order to do that, you are able to have more agency and influence on your life potentially. Yeah. But can you start us off, explain a little bit about the notion of finding a life's task to someone who may be like, well, I don't know if I have one.
Well, everybody has one. And of all of the chapters in all of my books, it's the most important one of all for fulfilling your life, for having what you want in this world. It's extremely important. And I believe I'm a complete egalitarian in that sense. I believe everybody is born with this capacity. Everybody is born with a life's task. And in the book, I kind of reduce it to genetics. The DNA that you possess has never been replicated in the past nor in the future. It is one of a kind. It is a mix of hormones, of chemicals that are completely unique. You are a unique phenomenon in the history of the universe. And it's something that may sound like a cliche, but if you think about it, it's very, very powerful. There has never been anybody like you. And you can add on top of that your parents, who also have their own uniqueness. They're raising you in a unique way with a chemistry that has never existed before. And you can also say that about your earliest experiences in life, the people that you interacted with. So you are a unique phenomenon in this world. And that uniqueness, what makes you different, is your life's task. Understanding what makes you different from everybody else clearly will indicate to you the career path that you should be following, should indicate what it is you should be studying in high school and college and when you enter the work world. And it's, for a lot of people, I believe for every child, it's very clear, but you don't remember it, right? So when you're like 2 or 3 years old, you're attracted to things, I call them primal inclinations. Abraham Maslow, the great psychologist, he called them impulse voices. You have these impulse voices that say, I like this fruit, I don't like that. I like this person, I don't like that person. You have these definitive tastes early on in your life. And a man named Howard Gardner wrote a book called The 5 Frames of Intelligence that I tell people that is very essential. That we associate intelligence with just intellectual power, but that's not true. There's intelligence in the body, kinetic intelligence. There's intelligence, a social intelligence to do with dealing with people. There's an intelligence that was with words and language. There's intelligence with patterns, which has to do with like math and music. There's kind of visual intelligence. And you have one of these, right?
Just like from doing nothing, just from being born.
Yes,
like you got one of them, right?
Genetically.
Sometimes two.
Well, usually it's one, but there can be a second one that you can combine that with. So we could look at a great person like Da Vinci, and he has he's like visually oriented, very much so, but he also had that mathematical kind of brain, and he also had that visual intelligence of being able to design mechanical things. Mechanical intelligence was the other one I was thinking of. So you have that. You have that. It's almost we put too many words and labels on it. It's something that's deeply ingrained in you. It's actually a chapter I'm writing about in my new book, and I'm going back to the ancient Greek concept of the daemon, that you're born with a kind of a guardian spirit and a fate that you are trying to follow, and you have to key into what it is that separated you at birth. All right. So you have this, but what happens is you get 5 years old. Your parents are saying, oh, you should be studying this. You don't want to go into dance. You want to start playing a musical instrument. Your teacher starts saying, you need to be studying, you need to get better at geometry, even though you can't figure out anything about math. Your friends start telling you things. Those impulse voices that you were hearing when you were 3 or 4 get drowned out by your parents, by your teachers, by your peers. You don't hear it anymore. You're 18 years old, 19, you're confused. You enter the work world, you haven't a clue anymore what it is that you actually love. Your parents say, go to law school so that you can make some money. You go to law school. You're like 29, you're 30, and you go, God, I don't really love this. I'm burning out, and you start taking drugs. You start getting into some bad habits because you're not connected to it. You don't love it, right? So it's something that everybody has. And I used in Mastery the example of Temple Grandin, a woman born with deep, deep autism, non-functional autism. At the age of 2, her parents were to commit her to a hospital where she'd spend the rest of her life, right? But she met a woman, a teacher, who thought she could teach this deeply autistic child language. And slowly she brought her out of Temple, out of her shell. And she realized she had a fascination, like a lot of autistic people do, with animals, right? She had this deep connection, almost she could understand their language.
I mean, she revolutionized the way we think of slaughter and, and animals. I'm a vegan person, so we know about her.
Okay.
She revolutionized the way that we understand, essentially food production.
Yeah.
Because of her understanding of animal, psychology.
Well, she had a connection to cows that was just insane. She just understood them deeply at a very early age. So I say, if someone born with high level autism can find their way to a life's task, I'm not saying it's easier, that's for everyone, but it shows that everybody has this potential. So I'm 100% egalitarian in the belief that everybody, even from the worst background, has this potential. But it's a lot harder for some people to realize, I understand. But you have it. And I counsel a lot of people who say, I don't have any idea what that is. Help me, Robert, I'm completely lost. You have to go through a process that I try and lead them through. So I don't have as much time as I used to have to do this kind of thing. But It is a process. It's a process of connecting to who you were in your earliest years, to those impulse voices, to what excites you, to what doesn't excite you. And I believe if I had the time, I could do that for everybody that came to me for this. I've had a lot of success in doing it, but I understand why it's not easy. I always felt attracted to words and language in an obsessive way, almost an unhealthy way. I just loved word games, right? And I loved history, and prehistory was my obsession. So, I knew it from an early age. So it's easier for me to say that. But I understand a lot of people don't have that for various reasons. And there might be a component to people who understand it deeply and don't lose that connection. There might be a reason why some people have that, like an Einstein, like a Steve Jobs, like a Martha Graham, people that I highlight in the book. There might be a reason why some people hold on to it better than others, that is genetic or whatever. I don't know. But I believe everybody can find their way back to it if we go through this process.
Mine, what did you like as a kid?
Telling other people what to do.
Ah.
I remember being 3 years old and the girls wouldn't play with me because I was too bossy. And, when I think about sort of like, I wanted to be a psychiatrist. I wanted to be a doctor. And then when I got to college, I wanted to be a psychiatrist and I didn't have the grades for med school. But yeah, I've always been interested in like therapy, talking to people, helping people, and I'm thinking like, gosh, was that related? As a 3-year-old, that's sort of managing and directing and being like, I want to play this way. Yeah, I don't know.
It was 2 years ago, I think. Mayim directed her first movie that she wrote.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't there on set, but when I was talking with her, she expressed feeling more at home and in herself on a set, which requires telling people what to do.
But being a director, meaning being in charge of every aspect of, meaning like the visual, I wrote it, so the words, like it was the best way of being bossy
Sure.